Now let's get to this October version of the college football playoff. I've been excited to do this. I want to revisit it every month. So we'll do this again at the beginning of November and we'll have a much more clear picture. But before I get to what I now say is the playoff, let's go back to the preseason prediction of what we said for our playoff before the season. So before the season, I had Ohio State number 1, Georgia 2. I had Utah 3, Miami 4. At 5, I had Notre Dame. 6, Texas. 7, Oregon. 8, Penn State. 9, Ole Miss. I had 10, Alabama. 11, Michigan. And 12, Boise State. So that's what I had before the season. And obviously, a lot of that is going to change. There were some things that I liked in that and some things that I do not like in that. So let's start just going 1 to 12. Let's fill out a new bracket based on what we know about the college football season and what we've seen from these teams to this point into October. At number 1, because I believe that the SEC champ is almost assuredly going to get the number 1 seed with the strength in that conference at the top, I think Texas wins the SEC and gets the number 1 overall seed in the playoff. I think they likely beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. And so Texas, Alabama in the SEC championship game. At number 2, I've got the Big Ten champion, Ohio State. I've got them beating Oregon in that game. And so Ohio State is still right up there at number 2 in the country. Now, I would still have them winning the national championship. I'm not going to play this bracket out, but this is just for the seeding purposes of, listen, I think we all know and understand now based on what's going on in the SEC after that game Saturday night between Alabama and Georgia, if Texas wins the SEC or anybody that wins the SEC is likely going to get the number 1 spot in the CFP. That brings you to 3 and 4, and that's going to be for the Big 12 champ and the ACC champ. So who's going to be the better champ out of those 2 conferences? Well, based on the way that those 2 conferences have played, it's going to be the ACC. I've got Clemson and Miami playing in the ACC championship game, and I've got Clemson winning that game. Again, the slow boil continues, folks. At this point, they're 212 degrees. They're a boiling pot of water that can power a locomotive. Clemson is getting better every week, and I've got them winning the ACC over Miami and getting that 3rd seed. Then you go to the Big 12, and that's a little bit more murky. We've had a Kansas State loss, Utah loss, Oklahoma State has lost twice. Those were the 3 teams that we really thought were like the cream of the crop in the conference. So now you've got, at least in conference, Arizona is still unbeaten in conference, although they lost to Kansas State. Just remember that was a non-league game. I know, just keep reminding ourselves of that. You've got Iowa State that's undefeated. You've got BYU that's undefeated. You got Colorado that still is undefeated in the Big 12. So there's a lot that can go on. So at this point, I've just got to say, who do I think has looked best so far this season? I think that's Kansas State. So Kansas State gets my number 4 seed. I think Kansas State wins the Big 12 over Iowa State in that game, and Kansas State gets the number 4 seed. So then we get into the at-large. And the reason I told you which teams lost those conference championship games is because then that will influence where they're seeded right here. With Alabama's win over Georgia, even if they were to lose the SEC championship game, Alabama would be number 5. So Alabama is the 5 seed in my playoff here in the beginning of October, and Oregon losing the Big Ten championship game would be the 6th seed. So Oregon gets slotted in right there at number 6. There's the Ducks. Now you get outside of who lost the conference championship games, and I'll get to more on that in a little bit. So Miami and Iowa State, they take a back seat because now we're going to have some teams that we know are going to have massive resumes and quality of resume and sentiment, narrative, all this stuff. So which team fits that bill the most? Georgia. Georgia at 7. I think that Georgia beats Tennessee and gets that 7 spot, even if they were to lose to Texas on the road. I see Georgia going 10-2. They lose to Texas on the road, but beat Tennessee, and a 10-2 Georgia team is easily number 7. You see where we get here. It's like Oregon at that point might have 2 losses, maybe, but maybe they had beat Ohio State and then lose in the conference championship game. So they get that 6 spot. Alabama beat Georgia. They get that 5 spot. So now Georgia lands at number 7, which leaves the team that they beat also going 10-2 with one of those losses to Georgia, Tennessee. So now Tennessee is the 8 seed. So you see how these start to fall into place and these dominoes start to fall into place. At this point now, I think Penn State enters the radar. And Penn State, to me, easily could be an 11-1 team, but let's just say that they're even 10-2. That this is a perfect spot to slot Penn State right there at number 9. And now it gets really interesting because it's pretty easy to get to 9. And I think most of you, now whether you agree with my slotting or not, like, I think that you can agree with this. You might disagree with who I chose to win the ACC or the Big 12, but as far as our top 2 seeds and then to 9, I think we all kind of understand, like, yeah, these are probably the best teams right here. So now it's going to come down to how do we think the season is actually going to play out? And who will we be deciding between for these last 3 spots? Obviously, there's a group of 5 here. So it really comes down to 2 spots. There's 2 spots left, and here's who I'm deciding between. These 2 spots come down to USC, Miami, and LSU. And let me tell you how I arrived at that. I see Missouri losing twice. I told you that I think they lose to A&M. I think they lose another time. And then with that schedule, their 10-2 is just not going to enter into the equation. That schedule has no power to it. And so Missouri, in this instance, would not be in a position where they would be considered. Ole Miss, the same way. I think Ole Miss is losing 2 more times. And at that point, they're not being considered. So that's why it comes down to USC, who this in this case would be coming off a win against Notre Dame. This is why Notre Dame is not being considered. Miami, who just lost the ACC championship game, and LSU. I think LSU, I expect them to beat Ole Miss in that night game at Death Valley. I expect them to beat A&M on the road, beat Oklahoma at home, and lose to Alabama. So for me, LSU is a 10-2 team, 7-1 in the SEC. 7-1 in the SEC, to me, gets you in. USC, even if they lose to Penn State next week, even if they lose to Penn State, then they can run the table. They can essentially have a play-in game against Notre Dame that final week of the season. If they win that, they'll be coming off a nice little win streak. And then you've got this LSU team that's 10-2, 7-1 in SEC play, and USC, and they're both sitting there. Well, guess who gets one spot and the other spot? USC and LSU. Because USC beat LSU. LSU would be going 7-1 in SEC play. They're going, but you have to put USC in that position because they beat LSU the opening week of the season. So in this scenario, SC plays Georgia at the 10 seed and LSU goes at the 11 seed and would play Oregon. That's how I got there. I see Miami stubbing their toe at some point. The reason I left Miami out is because I see them stubbing their toe at some point. That game last Friday night should tell us something about Miami's floor, which is they'll lose a game that they shouldn't at some point, and then go to the ACC championship game and Clemson beats them, and now 11-2 Miami. Folks, look at their schedule. They would have no quality wins at that point. So 11-2 Miami, 10-2 Missouri, 9-3 Ole Miss, 10-2 Notre Dame. They just don't have the quality wins to overtake these teams that are in. Because in this scenario, SC would have wins over Notre Dame and LSU. LSU would have wins over Ole Miss. They would beat A&M. They would beat Oklahoma. They would have better wins. So that's where we land, and then we get to the group of 5, and as you know, I'm a big fan of Ashton Genty with Boise State. I think it's going to be tough for UNLV to beat them. I think that the Mountain West winner should go to the playoff, which means Boise State gets the 12 seed, and there's my 12-team bracket as we enter October. That's how I got to that. I really love doing this experiment. I love thinking about how many teams are alive, how many teams feel like they're going to be playing games this month in October and in November with actual playoff implications. And just to review, my first 4 out are going to be Miami, Notre Dame, Missouri, and then that 4th one would have been Iowa State, the loser of that Big 12 championship game. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.